Welcome to a special edition of The Get Down. We are broadcasting live from Austin, Texas, where Consensus's conference is happening. Joining me in studio is Rashan Colbert. He is head of policy for dYdX. He previously served in the U.S. Senate for Senator Cory Booker. Now, Rashan, this is how we always kick off our show. Rashan, my butterscotch king, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Cleve. It's great to be here.
Oh my God. So I will say we're excited to actually kick off the conference in Austin. This is the 10th edition of Consensus in Austin.
All right.
My first one was in 2018. Is this your first one?
This is my second. So I did come last year. I was a brand new to the role when I came last year, but it was a great time to come here and see everything. And, for many years before, I've been following along online. So I'd watch some of the live streams, and I remember when it was in New York. And so then when they came here, I was like, oh, okay, bigger, a little, everything's bigger in Texas. So was really excited to come down.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is my fifth, I guess, because my first was in 2018 when it was in New York City. So it's day one, and it's going really well so far. Now, this consensus is happening on the heels of the crypto policy bonanza over the last few weeks.
Yep.
It's definitely, for those of you who are tuning in, crypto policy finally reached a space where we actually advanced a full crypto bill for the first time that was not part of a previous package. So what are your thoughts on the current regulatory landscape, given everything that's happened? Where are we?
Yeah, we're in an interesting position. Things are, as you said, moving forward in a real way for the first time. And I think it's interesting. You see these moments where things change, and I think we're in the midst of one of those.
An inflection point.
Yes, the momentum has shifted, and really there's been a building of things, all these different events that have happened in the last 3 weeks, last month, that have kind of culminated in a week ago, the vote in the House of Representatives to pass FIT 21. I think before that you saw some comments from major political figures talking about crypto. You saw some positive ones. You saw some negative ones.
Yeah.
Then I think we saw the vote in the House to pass the repeal
Yes.
of the CRA, Congressional Review Act, for SAB 121,
Yep.
Staff Accounting Bulletin for the SEC. But which really didn't sit well with people who are pro-innovation for crypto and really want this industry to grow in the United States. So we saw that in the House with a surprising Democratic group.
Yeah.
Then the next week in the Senate with, again, a surprising number of Democrats. So it's like, oh, this is bipartisan. This is serious. There had been a veto threat from the White House.
Yes.
But, I think they had to reevaluate, seeing how many Democrats voted to repeal. And then we had this big vote on
FIT 21.
On FIT 21 last week. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved how your former boss put it. When asked, when they I think it was Political asked Senator Booker, why he voted the way he did on the reversal of SAB 121. He said, I wanted to send a message.
Yeah.
And for me, that came out that the message was, we need a debate, right? This is not about, let's just kill it.
Yep.
He wanted to send a statement that a debate is necessary. Let's have it. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I think that he spoke for a lot of people with those comments. And I think, he spoke for folks who want to have a comprehensive debate on the real issues at play here. And I think, as I was talking about earlier, big political figures talking about this crypto stuff, it's been trending in some way for a while that, oh, is this a partisan issue? Is this a Republican issue? But I said, hey, no, it's not. This is a bipartisan issue. There are real important things at stake here that we need to have a full airing of. And I think that even beyond just crypto, the kind of these CRA votes are one of the few mechanisms that people really have to kind of air their frustration with the administration, and I think we saw that all coming to a head last week, or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the legislative process is supposed to be deliberative.
Yes.
It's supposed to facilitate a debate.
Yes, exactly. So it was good, and I'm glad that Senator Booker voted that way, but he was in good company. He was in good company.
Well, I'm glad you brought in the issue of bipartisanship, because that's a core, very central to our conversation. The crypto industry is very passionate about policy, but many in the crypto industry don't have a policy background, don't know intimately. I served in the Obama administration and worked in Congress, so I know, what we say we want, some of the obstacles to that. Now, unlike a lot of folks in crypto, you actually have a real lens for democratic politics in addition to how policy works. And also, you have a sense for bipartisanship. How do we achieve it, right? So given the enthusiasm that we're seeing more and more Democrats warm to crypto, we're probably overstating how bipartisan it is so far, but, we're measuring success in different ways. What do you think is the pathway to bipartisanship?
Yeah, I think, it's boring and maybe a little underwhelming for some folks in crypto who I think policy folks have been saying, hey, this is a long process. But that's kind of what I have to reiterate. Hey, this is a long process. And I think the first piece of that is education. And we've been doing that for a while, but we still have to stay at it. One of the things about crypto I like to say is, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm a crypto expert, be careful, because the moment you are an expert in this space, very soon you're not, because it keeps moving, it keeps changing, it keeps evolving. And so I think while it's important to make sure we're keeping the policymakers, we let them know what's kind of happening and what's happening in the news, where technology is going. We have to make sure that we're always underlining and reiterating the basic values, right? Ownership, transparency, sovereignty, all these ideas. And so people understand that, this technological revolution, it's enabled by blockchains, is a general purpose conversation. There are many, many things these blockchains can do. And so I think if more people can really understand the technology at a root level, then they'll see how it can impact their own lives. And that includes policymakers. So I think we have to keep talking to them, help them see the bigger picture, that this isn't just, a fly-by-night thing that's going to go away, in a couple of days. It's here to stay, and so you might as well engage, and that the people who support these issues, voters, constituents, care deeply, and they are paying attention to, what their representatives are doing.
Yeah. And you're right, education, but also shifting the narrative beyond just store of value.
Exactly.
Right, the underpinnings of blockchain technology. I'm actually speaking at Consensus later today. I'm a speaker for a town hall where we're going to be talking about digital identity rights. Identity management is is one of the applications and value add that blockchain can offer. But we, as an industry, we often stay around digital assets when it comes to policy. And I've heard from staffers in Congress that, a big concern for progressives is that they've heard this before, right? There was a time when the industry we call predatory lenders today came to Washington and said that they were going to, revolutionize and facilitate financial inclusion. The internet was supposed to decentralize us, and now it's concentrated. So, for our audience, Democrats are cool to crypto for a lot of reasons that may not have anything to do with crypto. So it's really, how do we let the legislative process play out as well, and also sit within, the issues for a while until we can get to a better place.
Yeah, it's interesting. We again have to keep widening that aperture, right? So they can see all the different pieces. So say I'm at dYdX trading, right? And so dYdX is a trading protocol, which is a financial use case for derivatives, right? So very specific, very niche, but in general, I got really excited about crypto years ago because I started to imagine all these bigger uses it could be used for. But I think we've just seen that this financial space is where it's had the fastest fit, right? It's a very obvious fit for the technology. It can enable new things in a really efficient, fast, safe, transparent way. And so that's great. That's why we're seeing progress there. But we have to keep helping policymakers see the bigger picture. I think, and also one of the things about technology, because that's what this is, right? These are computer science innovations. They're enabling lots of new interaction. Yeah. Technology takes a long time to mature. There was a hearing, I think, in the Senate Banking Committee last year, where they were discussing some crypto-related issues, I think, on illicit finance. And one of the guests, or one of the witnesses, said something like, crypto's been around for 15 years. It hasn't made good on the promise. And it's funny because he used as a counterpoint, I think, ChatGPT. He said ChatGPT came out and everyone immediately saw the benefit. But I think for anyone who has spent a long time thinking about technology, how it develops, artificial intelligence is something like a 60-year-old discipline, right? Yes. And so we've just gotten to this moment. Like, there have been lots of individual pieces that have worked well. When they start working really well, we call them something else: a recommendation algorithm, speech to text, et cetera. But ChatGPT is very robust, and its ilk, other large language models, very robust and very powerful. But yeah, it took decades to get to that point. And I think actually crypto has gone faster. Yeah. There's been faster uptake, faster progress in that. But to really live out our dreams and what we think the technology can enable, it's going to take some time.
And great point. AI is a great example that people don't know we've been using AI for decades. Like, this is not new. And it's intuitive. And because we've had time to work through, this interaction, and, even now with, deeper iterations of AI, not just generative AI, but even going deeper, that's going to take time. Yes. So, a familiar refrain in Washington is, we don't know what we don't know. And that's always been the case for technology, right? When we debated the internet in the 1990s, no one predicted the digital divide that it actually created, right? So, if we don't know what we don't know, what do you think is in the blind spot of the industry specifically? What are some of the things from the lens of your policy experience and now working in this space? What are some blind spots that you may want to caution the industry around as we actually continue to advocate for a fair and balanced regulatory and policy framework?
Right. Yeah, I think the thing that is hardest to know within any complex system is the motivations and actions of humans. Yeah. Right? What are people going to do? People are often fundamentally irrational, and so it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on. And so the people who are really thinking about most critically in this process are, of course, our policymakers, right? And our regulators to a different extent, but let's say our elected officials. Yeah. And so we have to think about what motivates them. What do they need? What do they want? What are their incentives? Yeah. I think that crypto and the industry has had to mature very quickly from a policy standpoint, and I think you can see that process very clearly. I think it started with people who obviously were essentially anti-government in many cases. And I think that libertarian ethos and strain, of course, runs very strongly within crypto. And the technology can kind of help this idea of independence and liberty significantly. But so then when people started to interact with the policy-making process more directly, they said, okay, well, then the policymakers cynically must be completely self-motivated. And so maybe we can just buy them all. Right, and we can throw a lot of money at the process and skip some steps and shortcut everything. I think we saw that that process or that tactic doesn't exactly work and can have major consequences. Yeah. And so then I think now we're starting to see that there is this complicated interplay of motivations. Right, there is money involved.
Yeah.
There are elections involved.
Yep.
There is, a political impetus. There is a drive to make sure that policymakers are meeting their voters, their constituents where they are.
Yeah.
And as the American public has started to show more and more interest, you're seeing that policy conversation start to hew more and more closely to what people really want. And then, of course, there are statesmen here. There are policymakers who want to look closely at the text and make sure that we're creating legislative solutions that are good for America on a competitive standpoint, on an economic standpoint. And really, it's all these things are happening at once. And so I think that we're still in that process of realizing that it's this complex system of interlocking parts. But I think that people are starting to see that.
Yeah. I joke that Washington is like Vegas. The house always wins. All you have to figure out is how the house, if you figure in Vegas, if you can figure out how the house works, you can actually get things done. And you're absolutely right. For the industry, campaign finance is part of that, because that's part of Washington. That's part of how things are done. But relationship building is central to it as well, and that takes time. But most importantly, you can't advance anything in Washington unless it's bipartisan. You need a Democrat. It doesn't matter how many champions we get on one side or the other.
Right.
Yeah. So now shifting things a bit, for those of us and those people in the audience who are listening or watching who are saying, I work in policy, how do I get into this industry? You shared some of the motivations, what attracted you to the industry. Tell us about your journey into why this issue mattered, why you focused on it when you worked for Senator Booker, and also why you actually wanted to be part of the industry and now in your role at dYdX.
Yeah, it's I think like everyone else in crypto, it's been a journey, and so it took a little while to get here where I am today. But I really, like a lot of people, I followed the price of Bitcoin many years ago, and I didn't really know what was going on. Okay, it goes up, it goes down. I don't know what's going to happen. But in 2016, actually, I got hold of this book called Digital Gold by, I think, Nathaniel Popper, which I have learned is the origin story of a few people in crypto. But that really just made it come alive. It's like, okay, there are these people who are working on these innovations and the cypherpunks, and it's really exciting. And what's going on? So I read that, and immediately I read the Bitcoin white paper, and Ethereum was growing, and read the Ethereum white paper, and then kind of got into everything I could. Learned a lot about the ICOs, ICO boom. So I was working for Senator Booker at the time, but I was doing research for him. So I did a bunch of different things and focused on a variety of issues. And then 2017, was a big year, obviously, for the market. And
first time Bitcoin came close to 20,000, and then we reversed course. But it was proof of concept.
Exactly. And so then everyone got excited, which gave me a good outlet to talk a lot about Bitcoin, because I'd been, for a year just reading everything I could. So then I got excited. 2018 was a more complicated year from a market perspective, but I started a very small startup with some friends that, enabled us to invest in crypto in an interesting way. Of course, that was very complicated from a regulatory standpoint, and so we folded after a year. But I learned a lot in that year. I learned a lot about the money services, the money transmission kind of ecosystem and regulatory landscape in the United States, and I learned some of the hard points of really trying to be an entrepreneur in the space. After that, I ended up starting to work more in technology policy for Senator Booker. And so it was great because I had this kind of unique viewpoint into the crypto world. And I obviously worked on a variety of issues. Worked a lot on artificial intelligence, a lot on privacy and big tech issues, social media, et cetera. But I also got to do some crypto stuff. And then Senator Booker joined the Senate Agriculture Committee, which it sounds funny, but it does have a significant oversight of the crypto space, because they oversee the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and so I got to dig in a little deeper on the relevant legislation there. Then, come 2022, I'd been on Capitol Hill for nearly 7 years by then. and I started learning, more and more about DeFi and sort of what was going on, and ended up getting into a process that moved very quickly. That ended taking me to dYdX as the head of policy there, and that was a complicated time to leave because working on Capitol Hill, FTX clapping at the end of the year, and everyone's saying, "Wow, is this the move you really want to make?" But I think it probably was the best time to leave, and I really obviously believe in the technology and in what it can unlock in the future.
No, it's a technology that once you get sucked in, you go down that rabbit hole, and it's hard to pull back. So I do want to give you a shout out, you and Senator Booker, because you mentioned when Senator Booker, became part of the Senate Ag Committee. There came a legislation that had a companion in the House, and it was all the rave. And the bill was the first time there was a provision on inclusion, and that was, Senator Booker added that. And for those of us who focus on inclusion, I was like, finally, right? We're having this whole debate, and not once has financial inclusion or diversity come into play. Consumer protection is not the same as financial inclusion or diversity. So tell us about why that provision was important.
Yeah, I think, it goes back to the core of the way Senator Booker sees all types of issues, and one of the things that that I tried to also live out in my work, serving the people of the United States and people of New Jersey, looking at what do the people who don't have a voice, who aren't a part of the conversation, what is really going to impact them, and particularly in our financial markets and in the economic system throughout the history of the United States, we have seen a complex and laborious evolution over time, particularly for Black people, from being property and not being allowed to own property to having lots of restrictions on what they could do, how they could build wealth, etc. And that type of thing doesn't change without some very intentional effort. And so I think that with that bill moving forward, there was an opportunity to make sure that people were paying attention to what needed to be done.
Well, I commend you. I think it was necessary to inject that into the conversation.
And thanks for your help on that.
Yes, I was a proud champion, cheerleader. Now, shifting a bit, to what you do now. Tell us a bit more about dYdX. So much of crypto is so inside baseball that, it's part of the DeFi space. So please don't confuse folks. Let's share the big picture of what dYdX does and what you do for them as the head of policy.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, dYdX is for the trading of derivatives. Crypto derivatives, a specific kind called perpetuals, right? And so, which is great, and that's a very popular product within crypto. I think that the most popular from a volume standpoint is a Bitcoin perpetual. You can trade those in centralized places like Binance, but you can also do it in a decentralized way, and we're one of the leaders from a DeFi perspective. But let me zoom back a little bit, zoom out a little bit, and talk about the technology. And so I think that when you're thinking of software in general, in particular, I think of protocols, right? And so a protocol is a few things, but it's a set of instructions. It's a set of orders. It's a proper order to do things, and it's a platform that things can be built on top of. We use many protocols on the internet and for computers for many decades. I always like to use email as an example. There's a few different protocols that underlie email, but two main ones, the simple mail and transfer protocol and the post office protocol, essentially they are sets of instructions for how your computers talk to each other. They send and receive electric signals, right? And it's very reliable. That's why whether you're using Outlook, Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail, Proton Mail, etc., you can send and receive emails reliably because there's this underlying substrate that the data is flowing back and forth on. Great, okay. The internet also works a similar way. So does communications protocols and yada, yada, yada. So all these sets of instructions. Then we have Bitcoin it's also a protocol, right? It's a
Yeah.
set of instructions, but what it does is for value transfer, right? So it's a set of instructions for computers to reliably send and receive signals that is recorded on a ledger, a public blockchain. And like, great, okay, so now we're stepping up. We get Ethereum, similar kind of thing. It's also a protocol for value transfer, but it's more sophisticated, right? So you can do more things than simply sending and receiving. You can program other applications onto it, and etc. Then, okay, so these are layer 1 blockchains. Then you have a layer 2, another protocol that the information there propagates down to the blockchain where it is recorded and transparently and securely. So you can now offload some of that processing power to these layer 2 protocols. Are able to do more sophisticated and more specific things. So dYdX for a long time was a layer 2 that one of the largest from a volume standpoint on Ethereum, that people could trade these specific derivative products, these perpetuals on. And then more recently, last fall, we released as open source software, version 4 of the protocol, our own chain. And so we have our own validators and our own network that allow people to trade these perpetual derivative contracts. And so why would someone want to do that? I think they are derivatives. Why do you want to trade derivative? There's a limited amount of Bitcoin in the world or Ethereum in the world, but a essentially unlimited amount of contracts you can make that point at the underlying asset. And so you can also then add leverage, and it's non-custodial. So people are controlling their own assets. Again, getting back to some of these core things that drew so many of us to crypto in the first place. And so that's really what dYdX is. It's a trading protocol for derivatives, and we're
and it's also
one of the
more
top.
accessible. One of the things about people use that term democratization of finance, but fintechs as well as digital assets has made a lot of financial services available to the masses in a way that they didn't have access to before.
Exactly. I like to think of it, one of the ways I've come to put it is crypto, blockchains, DeFi specifically, so decentralized finance, allows individuals to become primary actors in financial systems, right? And so basically in the traditional financial world, it is completely intermediary based. You want to do anything, there's at least one.
A broker, a trader, a banker.
Yes, exactly. Several layers of people in between you and whoever your counterparty really is. But now with blockchains, you're able to be, again, that primary actor. And so for trading, obviously for sophisticated things, it's very attractive for a lot of people who, unless you have millions and millions of dollars and tons of lawyers, it's hard to access certain markets. But now many people can. But then also for more simple things, sending and receiving money, small loans, et cetera, that also allows people to be that primary actor.
Well, it sounds very interesting, and they're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Well, as we wrap up, anything else you want to share?
Oh man, I really don't have anything super creative to share. I think what we're doing, a bit of about what I'm really doing with my job on a day to day. So as head of policy at dYdX Trading, we're really trying to think about what will a workable, useful, appropriate regulatory framework look like for DeFi. I think that there really shouldn't be legislation or regulation if we're not at a place where the best ideas have come out, and if there aren't very obvious dangers that we need to mitigate yet. And so we're still in a very quickly evolving space, and so we're not ready for legislation that is going to regulate DeFi. I think that there's some proposals out there that look at specific instances with illicit finance and or maybe some proposals for how centralized entities interact with DeFi. But really trying to think back to a first principles perspective, what is DeFi? Why should it succeed in the United States? How is it different from traditional finance. And so really working on these high-level ideas and communicating with policymakers and builders in this space and trying to really come together with this good set of ideas that will help us move into next year and years beyond.
And that seems pragmatic, right? Sometimes it's better to sit with the problem instead of trying to regulate it to death. And for the audience, crypto is regulated. There are lots of regulations. But the issue is our regulators are using 1930s policies for finance. And in the age of digital finance and the innovation economy, let's be honest, these 1930s rules don't work for traditional banks. They definitely don't work for fintechs, and now we want to apply them to decentralized finance, which doesn't make any sense. We do need to step back and say, one, we need to update the rules since the 30s, but also now figure out money has changed, value has changed, commerce has changed. Instead of government saying, this is all we do, the OCC does this, the CFTC does this, that's how we're going to do it. A new generation of retail investors are there, but also a new generation of creators leveraging e-commerce in ways we didn't anticipate. And we have to be more thoughtful than to rush to throw policies that don't work for anyone at them.
Yes, exactly. DeFi is different, right? And so it requires a different set of a different imagination to kind of see really the field of what's possible, what we can do. Also to look clearly at what are the risks, what are the trade-offs. Because, DeFi is a place that, again, these protocols are built by humans. We end up taking kind of individual judgment in some cases out of the loop when necessary, when that's going to make a better product. But, people design them. And so they're fallible in some ways, but they're very different ways than the traditional financial system. So, and you have to rethink things like customer or consumer protection. Consumer protection within the financial ecosystem to this thus far has usually meant how can a regulator make sure that they're getting sight into a black box of trust so that they can make sure that those people are engaging in best practices and have the best interests of their consumers at heart. You're going to hold their assets. We got to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Very different in DeFi. Individuals are holding their own assets and using this software to interact directly with one another. That doesn't mean there can't be technological risk, market risk, cyber security risk, but those are different and require different regulations, different legislation.
Yeah. And risk is something we have to deal with. Any investment comes with a measure of risk, but when you focus on consumer protection without coupling it or complementing it with financial inclusion, then you do a disservice to market participants.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to close. I'm going to put you on the spot. You mentioned, making a pivotal decision to, leave Congress and go to, not the dark side, the DeFi side, to the DeFi people. But you also got married.
I did.
So a lot of life changes. So as we wrap up, how is life?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Our anniversary was 2 days ago.
Oh, my goodness.
And so my wife is here in Austin. And so we celebrated before the conference got started here. And, we have some friends here that gave us great recommendations and things to do. So enjoying the Lone Star State, which is also the state of my birth. I was born in San Antonio. So it's good to be back. But, and so my wife works on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And so that's where we met, actually playing Senate softball in 2016.
Oh my goodness!
So yes, it's a very
a big thing in Congress.
Yes, for sure. And so she's still there fighting the good fight and working on behalf of the American people. I think I am too, just in a different way. But it's just been a busy year, and so which has been great, filled with, of course, work and now bearing fruit and progress in Congress. But traveling around, came to speak and tell the story of crypto and of DeFi and of dYdX. But also, just trying to enjoy every day and as much as I can. And I'm excited for what the future holds.
Oh my God. Well, with your wife in Congress and you here in crypto, I feel like the future of regulation is safe, right? We're good. We have it covered in all the bases.
Yes.
Rashan, thank you so much for joining us
of course,
and sharing your insights. And to our audience, stay tuned for another live broadcast from Consensus in Austin with my co-host, Witsi P. She will be back tomorrow. And be sure to check out our inaugural episodes at butterscotch.media. And special thanks to you, my audience, my Butterscotch kings and queens out there for joining the conversation. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we're going to enjoy the rest of Consensus. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.